David gave us this question. How do you know?
Mm.
How do you know it's your intuition? And he said, you kept saying you can't do it wrong. And that's not the way the world operates. Everything is right or wrong, good or bad, pretty or ugly.
Welcome to True and Unpolished with Lydia Singleton and Mary Howe. Our intention is to uplift, amuse, and inspire you to create more of a life you'll love through sharing our always true and often unpolished conversations. Let's get authentic, everybody. So, after last week's episode, which is really, really good, I'm super proud of last week. And it was Carrie and Mary and I, and we talked about oracle cards and kind of unpacked them and told you our view on them and really what the intention behind oracle cards is. Very different from the tarot, very different than really anything else when it comes to trying to get in touch with your intuition and building your intuition. But our number one fan had a question, and the question was around, how, like, we did a lot of this is what we do, and said, uh, trust yourself and just whatever you're drawn to and that sort of thing. And it reminded me that when I was a leader of a spiritual community, I gave a talk every week. And afterwards, people would come up to me and they'd say, "Oh my gosh, thank you for that message. And this was my favorite part." And they would tell me their favorite part. And they would say, "Oh, when you said," and I would think to myself, "I did not say that." And I bring this up because we hear what we need to hear. So when it comes to why and how, your everything you hear is filtered through the consciousness that you have. So let's say, and this is kind of early on in my journey, the kind of thing I would say, I want a house, I want a house, I want a house, I want a big house, I want a big house, I want a big house. And the energy behind that, the only reason why we want anything is because we think we'll be happier once we get it, right? And our soul has a longing, and that longing is greater than our human wanting. So really what we're trying to get when we're going for that intuition, when we're asking the question, the question is paramount. So if you're asking the question of what is the next step for my highest good, because your highest good is ultimately your joy, even if currently the next step is going to be, a little uncomfortable. So everything is filtered through our consciousness. I could read this card. I'm actually doing a daily card reading, and when I do that, I talk about my intuition behind the card for the people who are listening. And what I know is that they're going to hear exactly what they need to hear if their question is, what do I need to know for my highest good, if that's the energy behind their question.
Today, we decided to talk about intuition because the last episode focused on oracle cards because we talk about that a lot. And so today, we wanted to talk about that. And the reason is because David gave us this question. How do you know?
Mm.
How do you know it's your intuition? And he said, you kept saying you can't do it wrong. And that's not the way the world operates. Everything is right or wrong, good or bad, pretty or ugly. So, especially for very logical, scientific minded people, this concept of listening to your intuition is foreign. And I think that was his point. And also, he said the concept of letting yourself be drawn to something is intimidating.
Mm.
So you've got this world that we live in that operates in very black and white terms. This is the right way to do it. This is the wrong way to do it. And this concept of or feeling of intimidation because you're letting life show you the way. And that's intimidating.
Yeah, I totally see that. And honestly, too, I think a big piece of this is about trust. And trust is always primary to trust yourself, trust myself. So when I say I don't trust a person, really underneath that is lack of trust for me. So that would be saying, I don't trust me to know how to navigate around this person. And the reality is, you do. And even if you're in a moment where you can't reach that place, there is a part of you that is always operating, and that part knows. And so we're trying to quiet the thinking mind. So intuition speaks through our thoughts, but it's not born of them, you know? So thought isn't where intuition comes from. It's what intuition comes through.
Thought is only one way that it comes through.
Right.
I mean, different people have different gifts. And I think one thing to sort of mention, and whether you believe this is true or not, whether you believe you're intuitive or not, it's in all of us. I mean, we all have a soul, or this unending part of ourselves that is there our whole life.
Yes.
And
Yes.
sometimes we're more connected to it than we are at other times. So David gave a good example of, say, like with the Myers-Briggs, you take that test and you're looking at introvert and extrovert qualities. It's on a continuum, and everybody has some introverted qualities and some extroverted qualities. But what he was saying is, say I want to be, and for instance, be an extrovert, then I can easily take that test and skew the results of the test so that it's not accurate. It's not really a true reflection of who I am. And so that's an example of how we do that in our lives all the time. And I think that I think it's a really good question.
And I think part of what may be the first step is being open to suspending that idea that there is right and wrong, black and white, and that, that tension of opposites. And what happens, I think, ironically, when you do that and you open up to what's right and wrong, then your intuition can inform you what is right and wrong for you. It's kind of a paradox. But first, if you are in that space where you think there is right and there is wrong, there is black and there is white, what your intuition can't get through that rigidity. Your intuition comes through softness. It comes through being supple like a newborn child, as the Tao Te Ching says. And
You said supple.
Supple. Isn't that right? The word supple?
Yeah,
Supple.
it's a funny
It
word.
sounds like something that a turkey would do. Supple, 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 supple. It sounds like gobble, gobble, gobble. Do you ever say a word over and over again until it loses all its meaning?
Oh yeah, today I was writing a word. I can't remember what word it was now, but it was gourmet. Writing gourmet lettuce mix on tags at Sal's Old Timey Feed and Seed, where I plant stuff. And yeah, gourmet. And I kept writing it, and I was like, oh gosh, am I writing this
Oh
correctly?
yeah, I know.
Yeah,
When you're like, that cannot be the way you spell that.
right.
And I'm like, it's kind of elementary, literally.
Okay, so yeah, I wrote down, because to answer David's question, how do you know in regards to being drawn to something? How do you know in regards to, is this your intuition or something else?
Yeah.
And so I made a list of a few things, but mindfulness and practicing non-judgment what was on the list. But one of the big things that I tell people, my clients, is the best way to know is actually with hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually, and which kind of sucks because it's already happened. But even if so you have states of mind, you have the logical part, that's in your mind, in your brain, your thinking part, the part that is rational and reasonable and logical and mathematical, scientific. Then you have your emotion mind. That's like in your heart, the emotions that's passionate and impulsive and emotional. So then you have, so those are two states of mind. And then the third state is, if you had a Venn diagram, emotions would be on one side and reason would be on the other side, and in the middle is what I like to call the heart sense. So even though your emotions are in your kind of in your heart area, heart sense to me is like in the gut. So if you pull that logic down and you pull that emotion down into your gut,
Mm-hmm.
and listen to that. But in order to do that, you have to quiet your mind and practice non-judgment so that you can actually get to that place where you can like pull it all into your gut.
So Deepak Chopra calls that swallowing the deal. So before, you'd make a deal on something, a car or whatever, swallow it, sleep with it, be with it, and you might say, well, wait a minute, I have a deadline. The meeting is in an hour. When Mary said you can't get it wrong, you literally can't get it wrong, because every time you follow it, your intuition gets bigger. It's like a muscle. And, when you use it, it gets bigger. So that reminds me of something that I have told before, but it is when I was first being introduced to intuition, I started to follow everything that I thought. So I had the thought, you should go on a walk. And so I was like walking around the whole island, like everywhere. I did walk over here, that bench. And Mary has heard this a billion times, but literally I sat down on the bench and I'm like, oh God, I bet there's like money underneath. Somebody dropped like $100 bill. And that was not happening. There was nothing. I kept following the intuition to nowhere. And what was happening is, because I am a cerebral person, the rigidity that my intuition needed to get through was that thinking mind in order to get to me. Right. And,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at it in terms of the Enneagram, there is the heart, the feeling, emotional kind of people who go to their emotions for guidance, usually, and they're listening to their emotions. But ironically, whatever kind we are, so there's the heart, there's the instinct. My husband's an instinct guy, and I'm a cerebral. And whatever one you are, your intuition at first has to get through that thing. Like, that's the rigidity that your intuition has to get through, because we've learned habits of going to that instead of our intuition, instead of our intuition.
Yes. To kind of go back to the hindsight thing, and I had that long explanation of like, listen to that gut heart sense kind of thing. When we do that, like if I act, because I'm a more emotion minded person, if I am acting from my emotional state of mind, sometimes I confuse that with, no, this is what my gut is telling me, this is the right thing to do. But my emotions are fueling it. So if I act on that emotion, say I yell at somebody, or I make a decision about something that's based on the emotion, and afterward it doesn't work, it's not effective for what I'm trying, in alignment with what I'm trying to accomplish or what I truly want for myself, then I've learned the lesson. So if I use hindsight in that way to kind of go through the experience, do the things that get me in trouble or cause me suffering. And then I reflect back, not with judgment, like, oh, Mary, you did it wrong. But I reflect back and say, oh, I was in an emotional state when I made that decision. Or,
Mhm.
oh, that was a very logical, like logical sounds all good and everything, when everybody's talking about science is real all the time. It is. Science is absolutely real. That's the only thing I don't really get on that sign that is in everybody's front yards, is because yes, science is real, and it's also not the only thing.
Mhm.
So my point is, you can like go to that logical linear mind and get stuck there. But if you're going to a wedding and you're just sitting there, on the wall looking at all the logical linear things, then you're not enjoying that experience. So in those cases, being able to tap into that emotional state of being is actually beneficial. Then you get out there and start dancing and, socializing and having fun and enjoying your experience. So so the idea here is to begin to recognize what state of mind was I in, and use that information to reflect back when things don't go the way that you want them to go.
Mhm. Mhm.
Then that's a way. So that's the hindsight in particular is one way to strengthen the intuition.
Yeah, that is really helpful. And this whole episode is a big create more. And I will go back to a little bit what I was saying, because I think that, Mary and I are different people. Did y'all know that? That we're not
No
Midia.
way.
We're not Midia, or how else can you marry those? Larry. That's it. We're not Larry. Oh my God, what happened with that laugh? But yeah, we're not Larry. And so, we both have different kind of insights on this intuition question. So whatever resonates with you, guess what? That's your intuition.
Ding, ding,
Whichever
ding.
whichever story that you're drawn to. And I will just highlight again that you know, I believe that, intuition that is coming from our soul and not a thought that is coming from our emotions or our mind, our logic, or science, is a feeling place. Both of those things are feeling. So I would say when you are reflecting back, recognize how you were feeling. And you might feel like empowered, like, oh, good. I know what to do. I'm going to do this, right? Feel how that feel. How did that feel? Because that's a different feeling space than, oh, because to me, intuition feels like wonder. It's like, oh, and there is a quality to that space. And when you reflect back, you see, especially when you do it well, when you followed your intuition and it worked out, go back to that. What was that moment like? What did it feel
So my cousin Sally, she is just the most lovely person. And she went through a divorce about the same. I mean, kind of it started a little bit before mine did. And one of the things that she used to say is hindsight is 50-50. Throw things up in the air and I have a 50% chance of getting it right.
right?
And so we laughed a lot about that because of our experiences and what we were going through in our respective divorces. It was a good way to laugh at like the ludicrousy of it, like how many signs did I miss along the way
Mm-hmm.
that led me to where I am. But at the same time, all of it, for me is on purpose.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Because think about it. So if you follow it and it doesn't work out, that was on purpose, because now anything becomes purposeful the moment you decide, okay, this is going to be on purpose. So what is it? What was that situation trying to teach me? And A lot of times it is. You didn't follow your intuition, you were following something else. And the next step, that card came because you needed to make the mistake in order to get to the next place of understanding your intuition.
Or you needed to learn the lesson. There was a lesson to be learned.
Yes. And
Um,
I think if you're just beginning and you're just beginning drawing the card and you do the thing and it doesn't work out, that that is exactly what your intuition needed to get breakthrough to you. That was exactly the lesson you needed in order for your intuition to break through to you.
okay, so I guess what I was thinking about is suffering, because how do you know is a good question, and I think we're doing it. I hope we're doing a good job of explaining that, how, some ways to know. I think another question is, what's the point?
Right,
Why bother?
right.
And to me, it's all about suffering. I mean, everything that I teach, because personally, I suffered so much emotional pain that that's what I want to help people with, is their emotional suffering. And that is the reason why this is important and
Mm-hmm,
valuable.
mm-hmm. And
What do
all
you
of
think?
all of the who are they? All the big names, the Eckhart Tolles, the Artoli, I never remember, and the Deepak Chopras and the Esther Hicks, the Abraham, all that stuff, Byron Katie, they say that all suffering comes down to just this one thing, and that is, am I accepting what is or not? Right. And the Buddhist tradition would say the mind is Maya. So as soon as we start with the judgment, the black and the white, and in my experience, rigidity feels bad. And if it had an opposite, I don't think it is the supple, 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 supple. I think if it has an opposite, it is intuition.
Intuition is the opposite of rigidity.
Yeah. If it had an opposite.
Well, right. So intuition comes through openness.
Yes.
Intuition comes through a clear mind,
Yep.
whereas rigidity is closed off,
That's right.
or thinking I have the answers. I'm right.
Yes.
Uh, you
Yes.
know, or I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Like that judgment
Yes.
is
Yes.
rigidity.
And, I would say that my suffering is definitely always dependent on that. Am I open? So, am I open to the present or not? And Eckhart Tolle also says that there are only three things to do in any situation:
Oh
change the
yeah, I love
situation.
this.
Yeah, it's change the situation, leave the situation, or accept the situation. Everything else is not your intuition, it's ego, it's crazy. So,
Well, that's what the serenity prayer is.
so it's, and that's about accept, right? That's exactly what it is. So, three choices, whatever it is that you're questioning, whatever it is that I'm questioning, there is three choices. You change it, you leave it, you accept it. That's it. And your intuition will be telling you one of those things.
Hmm. Well, Abraham says, I love this. Take a nap.
Yeah.
Meditate or take a nap. If you don't know what to do, or you're not in the right space,
Mm-hmm.
too emotional, whatever, take a nap
That's
or
right.
meditate.
Yes. It's a reset. Whatever you need to do to reset. If you're angry, doing some kind of physical activity, because we feel that in our body. We feel anger in our body, and it gets trapped in there unless you let it out through some way. So take a jog, take a run, play tennis, because
Yes.
you will be much wiser after tennis.
Well, I would just add that anger is an energy emotion. So is anxiety. And so that energy, because what happens is your body releases adrenaline, cortisol in those situations, and that is a survival mechanism. So that energy is intended for survival. If you're afraid, then your body releases those hormones so that you can run or protect yourself. Same with anger. I mean, it works in the same way. And so what we do as humans is, if there's a tiger in the room, then we get afraid. If we go back the next week and the tiger's gone, then we've still got that past memory in our mind, and we react in the same way. We think, oh no, that tiger might be there. And instead of, telling ourselves, no, it's safe,
Right.
we get trapped in that past thinking mentality. And so then that survival mechanism is reacted, and we're not in a life-threatening situation, so it's not necessary. But our body reacts in the same way, so then that energy gets trapped. And that's why doing exercise or burning that energy off is so helpful.
Yes. And that energy will be screaming through your thoughts, through your emotions. And so the key is that's not your intuition, that's your emotions. That's, so you want to, that reset, that take a walk, meditate, physical activity, whatever it is that you take a nap, that reset is quieting that down so it doesn't inform all of your thoughts and you actually think it's your intuition when in reality it's your thoughts. And I would say too that a good therapist is a great thing because they, whether they know it or not, they are using intuition because they do not have, a dog in the fight. They're not you. So they can see from a different perspective. So if you're coming from emotion, my therapist says my spidey senses tell me. That's the words that she uses. And so a good therapist will be accessing their intuition and your intuition, because I think they're all really the same. They meet together.
And I mean, it could be a good friend or a good coach or good any helper. I think that being able to calm the thoughts, calm the emotions, so that they're tapping into that wisdom, really.
Mary and I do that for one another, but I can tell you that there are times where all of a sudden I can see that what I've decided, oh, this is what Mary needs to know. And so as soon as I know this is what she needs to know, and I'm not open to the next thing that comes out of her mouth, I no longer am accessing my intuition, but rather the part of me that wants to be right.
And that's when I'm like, no, you're wrong.
Right. Well, she says I'm wrong every time, even if I'm right.
I do not say that. That is not true.
You're like,
I'm doing it now, though.
Yeah, see, she did it. She always does. And then at the end, she's like, oh, yeah, okay, that's the same. All right, we got there. But yeah, a good friend, and it's not friend in necessarily the way the world thinks of it. To bring it back to what David brought up, yes, this is not the same way that you were taught. You were likely taught the world works. And what we're saying is the world works that way if you work it that way. But if you work it this way, it works another way. So you choose.
Why bother?
Right. Why bother? Because I want to be happy.
Right. Well, you can't always be happy, Lydia.
No, but I want to be comfortable. I want to trust myself.
Content.
Yeah. I want to be intentional.
I don't want to suffer. I mean, so to me, suffering is staying trapped in the pain that is inevitable. So, pain is valuable. Pain serves a purpose. But we keep it going with our thoughts or our emotions that then fuel more thoughts. So we keep the pain going when pain is meant to serve the purpose and move through and leave. So I think, when people would, and I know that when you said, I just want to be happy, that's not exactly what you meant. But that is commonly what happens when people come to therapy. I just want to be happy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm sorry, you're in the wrong place. I am
right.
so sorry.
Yes.
I can't
Yes.
help you with that. I can help you create more happiness. I
Yeah.
can help you tolerate the pain. But you're never going to be, happiness is not a permanent state.
No. But that's that quote, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And so when people say they want to be happy, I think what they mean is I don't want to suffer. And you do have a choice whether or not you live a life in which you suffer. And I feel really good about the things that Mary and I are giving to you guys, Carrie, all of our guests. I feel very, very good about it. And I feel like, your intuition is telling you to keep listening to us. And to do that, you've got to subscribe, everybody. How did that work? Was that
You
seamless?
nailed it.
I feel like I nailed it. Subscribe, everybody, please, pretty
And
please.
like this episode.
Yeah. And we're on YouTube. We're everywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, I, whatever the I is, because I have an Android phone. It's all out there. Apple Podcasts, that's what it's called. So, everybody, if you could,
Apple Podcasts.
I am serving, this is the voice of your intuition. And it is telling you to subscribe to True and Unpolished and like us on Facebook and follow us on Facebook and Instagram and message us to tell us that you're doing that so that we feel even better than we do in this moment. I will be happy when you all subscribe. Okay.
But seriously,
Yeah.
one, if your intuition is saying no, don't do it, then you can listen to that. And it is helpful in getting the message out there. And so we hope that you will
Yes.
do that so more people know about what we're doing and talking about.
Well, my intuition tells me that I think we're done. So you have been listening to True and Unpolished, the podcast. Let's see what happens next.